Bonjour à tous. Donc, ma première diapo, c'est pour répondre à cette question sur l'implication des personnes. C'est vrai qu'on s'est dit déjà, nous, finalement, comme on l'a évoqué avant, il y a déjà des informations un peu réglementaires qui existent, mais on se rend compte quand même que c'est pas suffisant. Finalement, il faut bien porter les documents, et puis aussi que les messages un peu bruts, les messages descendants, ne suffisent pas à sensibiliser et permettre le passage à l'action. Donc c'est un peu le premier point clé, c'est cette prise de conscience de la nécessité d'impliquer les populations, de les mettre au cœur de la démarche pour permettre une action derrière. Deux leviers majeurs nous semblent importants. La participation, donc vraiment permettre aux populations de passer du rôle de spectateur à celui d'acteur de leur propre sécurité. Et puis aussi sensibiliser en passant par le côté un peu émotionnel, sensibilité des personnes. Ça montre aussi que finalement cet aspect il diffère d'une personne à l'autre. Ça peut être un peu en fonction de nombreux paramètres comme l'âge, le milieu social, le risque auquel on est exposé. C'est pas tout à fait la même chose d'être exposé à l'inondation ou au séisme par exemple. Voilà, donc pas mal de critères, le vécu aussi, si les personnes ont déjà vécu des événements traumatisants. Finalement, pour toucher le plus grand nombre, on se rend compte qu'il faut vraiment, pour cela, multiplier les différentes actions, que ça soit dans leur type, donc on en parlera sur la question suivante, mais aussi dans le temps, puisqu'on se rend compte qu'il y a pas mal d'actions qui sont un peu ponctuelles, mais l'important c'est d'avoir une action continue dans le temps. Enfin, le dernier point que je voulais évoquer sur cette diapo, c'est aussi le besoin qu'on ressent de recréer des moments d'échange d'informations qui se faisaient finalement peut-être plus naturellement dans le passé, où il y avait peut-être moins de déménagements et donc une meilleure mémoire des événements. Des espaces de partage et d'entraide qui permettaient peut-être une meilleure gestion des crises. Je vous ai mis une diapo aussi pour vous parler sur le sujet que le Cerema porte, ce sujet de la culture du risque. On a travaillé sur ces sujets avec plusieurs publications qui sont sorties l'année dernière, donc vous en avez quelques-unes là dans les stands à côté de l'amphi, ou même un guide à venir vraiment sur un guide méthodo avec une large place à des retours d'expérience de porteurs de projets qui présentent finalement les actions qu'ils ont pu mener, les bénéfices qu'ils peuvent retirer et aussi parfois les difficultés rencontrées. Tous ces travaux nous ont permis d'identifier plusieurs approches originales qui sont utilisées donc par ces porteurs de projets. Je vous en ai mis quelques-unes sur ce diapo. Utiliser par exemple les sciences collaboratives et participatives, sensibiliser donc, par les arts, les jeux ou les expositions sensorielles, les nouvelles technologies de l'information, faire témoigner des personnes qui ont pu vivre des inondations, changer de regard sur les risques. Ça peut être aussi, par exemple, commémorer un événement qui s'est passé et en profiter pour faire un festival avec de nombreuses activités autour du risque. Et je vous présenterai quelques exemples dans la question suivante.
So, I think one of the things in terms of engagement for us and how to involve people and managing and looking at their flood risk is, I think we need to define what engagement is and what that means to people. And I think one of the key things for us is that engagement is a two-way conversation. It shouldn't be prescriptive and it shouldn't determine what the outset of those engagement discussions, conversations, ideas should be before you actually have that conversation. A lot of the frustration for flooded people, especially in the UK, is that they tend to feel like they're told what to do and then it's kind of brought into the sphere of engagement. So engagement programs that are successful, that will not only raise awareness but also bring empowerment to communities and to people who are flooded is very important. Innovative projects, so thinking of projects that will be different, will allow new approaches, which will allow then potentially more funding to be secured in the future if those pilot projects are successful, is very important as well. Addressing how people access their flood warnings, how they understand what the risk is and what is the issue with those flood warnings, again linking back to the first point of how you involve people, having sessions on understanding after a flood event what went wrong with the flood warnings that they received, what went right is very, very important as well. Again, bringing information and data collection, but bringing the community within to that. So a lot of the time, again, when looking at flood risk, there's information out there such as maps, data collected, but actually, again, the key information that goes into those flood risk maps, that data needs to be, or needs to have a key input from those flooded communities. They will have that historical knowledge, they will have the understanding of what has happened within their area. So involving them will help them feel that they're managing and also looking at their flood risk as well. Build back better programs, so looking at what can be done to make either your area, your property more resilient, understanding the difference between resilience and resistance within looking at your property, with looking at how to build back better after a flood. So thinking of things such as resilient, thinking of access points, electrical points, raising them higher within a property, understanding the situation of a flooded person's property and how it deals with that. Also capital programs, looking at how we ensure that people and areas and groups and communities have a vested interest within that capital program. Again, thinking of examples of good engagement, allowing co-creation of those projects, not just involving people at the end or the inception of a project. One of the biggest key frustrations for people who are engaged who are flooded is that a project is completed, ready to the point of delivery, and then they have what's called a drop-in session. So again, ensuring that those capital programs, that investment that's made is done specifically to the point of the community and at that point of co-creation as well. And again, recently as well, we have involvement with communities and people looking at how to look at the catchment around them and investigate and incorporate nature-based solutions as well, and actually using the catchment and the identifying the history of that catchment and using the local community to understand where and how those nature-based solutions might be incorporated, but also then leaving the longer-term legacy of allowing those communities, those people to take active participation in the longevity of that project, the legacies after authorities and agencies have moved on to the next project. Oh, sorry, it is still me. So there is, I touched upon as well, property flood resilience. It's something that's very, very kind of a key concept and a key thing that is being pushed, again, in relation to flood risk. Property flood resilience does look at how one can protect their property, how they can ensure that there's areas where they can stop the water entering, but once the water has entered into the property, how do they ensure that the water can be, or the cleanup after the water has left is much easier. There are examples of where this can be relatively cheap, relatively easy to install, but then this is a very sliding scale. There are lots of interventions, lots of property flood resilience products out there that can cost into the tens of thousands of pounds. The industry itself does have a system of certification to understand if the product is viable. It's been tested to a certain standard, which is good. We do have two types of that, which is the ISO standard and then the British Kite Mark as well. But again, in terms of the industry, it's not always every product has to be kite marked for you to sell that product within the market. So again, there is a disparity with property level resilience in terms of certain products may be kite marked, but not all of them. So for the consumer, it's very difficult to understand what happens. And also when you've been flooded, it's very difficult to find the right information. Sometimes there are tools available out there. again, it's how the property flood resilience is implemented, how it's cared for, how it's maintained after an event. There's a lot of information that goes into how a property might be able to put some of these products on. Again, it's very difficult to differentiate by what we mean by how much and how successful property flood resilience can be. We've had a lot of name changes over the years. It used to be called property level protection, but again, the misnomer there of protecting your property, you can never fully protect, so it's now changed to property level resilience. Again, there is information out there. We at the National Flood Forum have a centralised directory of products which we offer with no specific angle, or it's all non-committal. You can get free impartial advice from us on where and how to do it. But again, this industry is burgeoning. There are now information, and there is looking at trying to standardise and make sure that there is a structure put in place to ensure that property flood resilience doesn't slip through the cracks if there has been bad cases. And again, it's also making sure that property flood resilience isn't implemented in areas where it's always going to fail, because the breadth and size of the flood will mean that it's not going to be viable. Oh, sorry, still me. One of the other things as well which we do, which is also important to the project that we're doing as well, which is flood risk maps. Ensuring that we map the right areas, ensuring that we map, again, as mentioned earlier, with the help of engaging properly with communities, understanding where the flood risk is, where there might have been flood risk in the past, historical events. This all helps build that picture of the flooding. And again, it helps in terms of, for insurance companies, for businesses, it helps planners and people make those decisions. There's several types of different maps and data for those scenarios. And again, the aim here is to make sure that whatever is looked at in terms of a scheme, in terms of a project, that information through those maps, through that information and data, then does help get the right scheme, the right information in place. Again, linking back to how we involve communities and people within that engagement, it's very important that they are able to drive where they think that will be. A lot of the time as well, we have the need to merge our flood risk maps together, because we have such a different element of types of flooding. So we may have main river flooding, which shows the extent of the flooding on flood risk maps, but we do have sometimes a lack of surface water flooding maps, which will then highlight where people are affected by that. We also have projects where we're looking at trying to map groundwater flooding to ensure that, again, those areas are linked. But again, all the while through this, it's ensuring that those communities are at the forefront of whatever planning, whatever information goes in. And I think some of the work we're doing on the BRIC project is very exciting with that, in the community level mapping in relation to that.